Welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of Coach to Influence, where I bring in great coaches, sales leaders to share what works, what doesn't, the latest, the greatest. I'm sure a multitude of the people listening in today know my guest, David Wilkins, who has either founded or co-founded SDR leaders of APAC, SDR leaders of EMEA, and SDR leaders of USA. He has had an impact on the careers of dozens, if not hundreds of SDRs and their respective leaders. So can't thank you enough for taking the time to chew the fat with me today, David.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks so much.
So let's dig into coaching. I know you see not only things with your own team, but through the numerous Slack channels that the SDR leaders, respective groups have. I'm curious what you feel is the biggest learning gap for teams today.
I always use sporting analogies. I used to be a former teacher, former rugby coach. So I always like to lean on those kind of sporting analogies. And Michael Jordan was a great basketball player, terrible administrator, terrible leader. Because he can do it, but he can't explain how he did it. And when he had that talent around him at the Wizards, I used to get the NBA, especially when he came back in the 2000s. He was just always frustrated with his team because they couldn't do what he could do. And I think that's the big thing when it comes to leadership, and the big gap around leading people is it's normally the best operator gets promoted into a people manager role, and they don't know how to convey the skill that they had into upskilling the rest of their team. So that's, I think, the big issue.
So what are you telling some of these super awesome, dynamic, insert your own adjective here, SDRs that now have the mantle of leadership on them? Because it's not like it was when I got started and I had my first leadership rule where the marching orders were, you're going to fail. This is not going to look good. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. Now go out and make them.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, to the SDR that just got promoted today, that has a few weeks to prepare before they have the mantle of leadership, what are some of the things you'd suggest they get their arms around, or her arms around?
The big thing I would go back to them and say is, are you sure you really want to do this? Because this is a thankless job. You are not now responsible just for your performance. You're responsible for 8 other people. You have some impact, but really you're relying on the rest of your team to have that, do the output and do the work. So I'd ask them, are you really sure you want to do this? And then second of all, when I look to promote people into a leadership role, I'm looking for them to have already done mentoring of new talent, to take on projects and lead those successfully. I need to see that they can actually do it before we give them that responsibility for hiring and firing and performance. So if they haven't shown that to me, then it's unlikely they're going to get promoted. But then if I'm just dropped in and told, you got this new person who's reporting to you, who's a manager, I would really want to understand how their processes of explaining skills and how they can really convey it to people in the simplistic possible denominator about how they would say about how to make a call. How do you coach that? How do you explain that? How do you explain the objections that people are going to be facing? So I'd really want to break it down to that level of, show me how you would actually train and coach people. Because again, you can't just go up to somebody, using a soccer analogy, and just show, like, cross a ball into the box and then try and volley it in and just say, right, do that. You haven't explained how to do it. You haven't explained the why. And so you really need to see if you can have those skills about where you should be, how you should be positioning yourself, how you should be moving and turning. It's the same for on that coaching side.
Is that what made you start SDR leaders? What got that into your and your co-founders' heads?
Yeah, that was the big thing. I was very fortunate and very blessed where I got a lot of leadership development training when I came through the ranks. And I also was given training and development for beyond the level I was at, because the pathway for me was to be moving into a third line role that I was identified. But I realized even some of the largest companies I worked at, that wasn't the standard, and it was figure it out for yourself. And so what the reason for creating the community was to create that space where leaders can get that coaching and support and mentoring about what good looks like and how to navigate tough conversations and navigate tough situations, because you can't ask your peers. They might not know. Your boss might be hours and hours away. You can't ask somebody else that maybe is not happy with you in sales or marketing. So who do you go to? So that was the reason why we created the community.
It's a great community. I found a lot of value in it myself. I see a ton of SDRs getting a lot of value out of it, and at the very least, I've made some great relationships. So thank you. It's for any SDR leaders or SDRs that are out there that don't know David. For the both of you, I would suggest take the time to get to know David. Join the group. It's a great repository for knowledge and best practices, but it's also a great support for leaders that are finding themselves in the thick of it for the first time with nothing more than just do what you did. Teach them to do what you did. Seems simple enough. I've asked this of a lot of leaders recently. What is something you know now as dogma, as fact, that you apply everywhere, that you wish you knew the first time somebody said, hey, you're in charge?
Hope is not a strategy. Yeah, I'll explain the background to this. I'd have
Sorry.
was it.
It's funny because it's true. You see these young kids, man, they're like, they're doing okay. I'm just going to hope for the best. Hopefully nobody sees me crying under my desk.
So the background to this is I had a really good leader who I worked with at Infoblox. His name was Sharif Sleeman. And we'd be in leadership meetings, and I would hear people say, I hope this deal closes, or I think it's going to close. And it was like, he would red flag to a bull, and he would just go at people and say, no, hope is not a strategy. Tell me exactly why you expect this deal to close. And I was pretty quick on this. I learned when I talk, I can't say, I hope we're going to close this amount of pipeline, generate this much pipeline. I had to be very clear about what my plan was for how we're going to get to that. And that's one of the big things I always repeat to my leadership is hope isn't a strategy. Tell me exactly how you're going to get to that. And it's really uncomfortable for people because they've been allowed to a lot of people are allowed to just get away with saying that. But when you actually have to think about it and tell me the steps it will take for you to get there, that becomes, you see people get very defensive. You see people get very quiet because they just think they can get away with saying that stuff, and it makes people think more. So hope is not a strategy. That's the major one.
It's an interesting perspective to take. I find that a lot too, where it's you have to explain yourself and automatically you're on the defensive. You don't trust me. You don't believe in my ability. Why did you hire me then? And I think a lot of sellers don't appreciate the fact that hope is not a strategy. Hope does not drive revenue, and you can't enter any hope variables in any of the reports that a sales leader has to share with their leadership.
You know, when my former boss of mine as well, Malcolm Murphy, he was really good at training me, and he would really dig in and ask me the whys about everything. And I too was really defensive when he first did it. But it was that thing of, okay, I get it, why he was doing it. He was smoothing the edges to make me a better leader, and it worked. I just think a lot of people just need to realize, I think 99% of people that say I hope a deal is going to close, that deal is never going to close. And people just need to realize that there's a corporate governance that's needed in a business, and we need to know exactly.
Yeah, it needs to be. You can't build a pipeline on fiction.
No.
Well, you could build a pipeline on fiction. You can't drive revenue on fiction. You had mentioned something earlier that struck with me. What would you tell, or how would you help that first SDR? And the first thing you would mention is this something you really want to do? You know as well as I do that ego's away when you ask that question, and they're automatically going to say, yes, I'm prepared. I'm ready. Not that I've made the investment in being a good leader. I've made the investment in doing my job, which qualifies me to be a good leader. So assuming that the answer to your first question was, yes, I want to do this and I'm going to kill it. What are some of the steps or tools or things that you would ask that SDR leader this newly minted SDR leader to focus on for the next chapter of their career?
Yeah, I mean, the follow-up question would be like, why? Why do you think you're ready? Tell me about the things that you've done to prepare yourself. I think the kind of basis piece, it's really around measuring performance and get that one-on-one process with your direct reports. Again, coach them on that piece, because if you're a second line or a third line leader, you're relying on your direct reports to flow up information about what's going on, the kind of heartbeat of what's going on in the business. And so you need to be able to say, if somebody asks you at the exec level, what's going on in Germany right now, you need to be able to go and say, go to your manager, right, exactly what's going on and what are the things that are you going to do to fix issues? And you want that manager to say, right, in our one-on-ones, this has been the trends that I've been seeing. This is what we're doing to fix that. And then you want that report back after a few weeks about, okay, we did this and we've seen this much improvement. The one-on-one is really critical for that knowledge transfer and that development. And that's the big thing that I teach leaders, especially in EMEA, where firing people is a lot harder than anywhere else in the world. You need to have that documentation and evidence about non-performance pretty early on to avoid very costly, elongated terminations.
Yeah, don't miss having to manage EMEA teams, not in the slightest.
Great. Amazing.
You coach a team currently. You're connected to thousands of guys that coach teams. What's the one buzzword you're hearing nowadays that you wish would disappear? Feel like I just lit a fuse.
Yeah. I tried it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I've tried, it doesn't work. And that's like around emailing, calling, social touches. It's a learned helplessness that they tried to do something once. And then because that one time they didn't get the right response, then it is obviously isn't working.
Well, didn't anybody tell you that outbound is dead?
Yeah, normally,
That's why it's not working.
normally people that have just sell snake oil say that, or have only managed a team of one person selling crap to businesses. Not the largest enterprises in the world have hundreds of SDRs and BDRs, and they're hiring like crazy because it works. And I think it's that learned helplessness of this thing, we've tried it once, it doesn't work. And it's like, well, what else are you doing? Tell me, explain to me what the other things that you're doing to try and change that. That's my big thing. The other thing is around intent, positive intent, and what people say, and about how people react. If somebody does something to you, so maybe they don't move a meeting to the next stage so you don't get paid, and it's suddenly like, oh, this is shit. Take a step back and think, do these people actually know how I am paid? Do they actually know the process? Because you can't just assume that people know everything about your business and about how you're paid and how you're measured. And so have you actually taken the step back to say, hey, actually, if you move it from this stage to this stage, then that's how I'm paid. And it's hit all of these correct criteria. And most of the time it's, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry, didn't realize. But the mindset of some people is like, oh, they're just out for me. I was like, no one's out for you. No one cares about you. That's the big thing. Everyone's worried about themselves, not about the rest. And so you just need to sometimes have that step back as well and diffuse.
Yeah. So I think this sort of lines up with my next question. You may have answered it. I was going to ask you what your biggest pet peeve is in sales, but I figure we just dove into that, which is that sense of victimized helplessness that some of these reps have nowadays.
Yeah, and it comes back down to not having the basics, like the knowledge of the function or the wider how the business works. And I don't know if it's a generational thing as well. I'm not sure. I'm not a psychologist, but sometimes things don't work out, and it's not always going to be successful. Sometimes you need to figure it out to see how you can get it successful. And that resiliency is a massive piece. But if you're going to progress in your career, the people I see that have been most successful, who started out as SDRs and now are running big enterprise teams, they're the most resilient people. That's the cool thing about them. They're always trying to figure out how to improve.
Good ones, at least. I mean, I tell organizations all the time, the SDR function is not only sometimes the first face of your organization, but they're an incubator for your future leadership.
Yeah, 100%.
You've got a gang of super excited, enthusiastic, ambitious individuals, which is why the role of an SDR leader is so important, because you're not just that first person that's helping carve out their sales career, but you're also that first person that's having an impact on them professionally.
Yeah, completely agree.
AI in sales, lifesaver, threat, just a lot of hype. What do you think?
I think we've gone past the hype of it now, where a lot of people got a lot of money to sell stuff that doesn't work. And what's happened now is now organizations going, okay, actually, how can we help improve the processes that we have in place? How can we tweak them? And that's where I think is where the best wins are going to be, is how you can take an administrative time that reps are currently spending on lead list building, on account identification, and do that in just a click of the button. I'm currently doing a project with someone where their reps are spending about an hour and a half a day on administrative tasks. And so it ends up being about 250 hours a year that the whole team spends on administrative tasks. And so my what if is, what if we can find something that gives us back that time to actually be productive? What's the cost? What's the revenue that we can generate? And we figured it out. There's potential for this business. Is current potential about $6 million of pipeline that we can build additionally, and another and a $1.5 million of revenue that we can garner if we can find something that costs 50, 60K a year. What's that? 1,000x that ROI. And so that's the big thing for me. And currently is how with AI.
All right. I appreciate that. Now let's have some fun. What's your go-to pump-up song before a big pitch, a meeting, a demo? What are you using to psych yourself up?
1989, Grateful Dead. Any songs from the 1989?
Nice. Okay. That's going to lead me to my next question then, because Grateful Dead is quite an unusual. I haven't heard it yet. I've heard some Zeppelin, but most unusual spot you've ever had to take a sales call from.
Yeah, I think either AM after during sales kickoff and having our party the night before, and doing it just in the main lobby before we go into the main room, or what was the other one? I think I was walking through the streets of London once because I think it was too late, so I had to do the call walking through the streets of London in the middle of the night. That might be the two ones.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
All right, last question. Who is playing David Wilkins in the movie about your sales career? Now, I've had an answer to this one forever. I'm curious to see how close we come, or if you feel insulted by my answer. But I'm curious to see who's playing you in the movie of your sales career.
What's his name? The guy who just was in Adolescence, the dad. What's his name? He lives like in Leicestershire, where I'm from, a local, so I can pop over and ask him.
Let's see. Adolescence cast. Stephen Graham?
That's the one. Yeah.
Okay. I had you at Ricky Gervais only because of the humor you've expressed on several phone calls. I always find chatting with you to be quite funny.
I try and hide that because it might get me in trouble or get me cancelled. So I hide that a lot.
I was going to say, you look like the type that you'll throw a can of beans at somebody.
It's been known to happen, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's funny how times have changed. I started my career in a very expressive bean can throwing environment, and nowadays that'll get you arrested, especially if you miss and it goes out a window.
Yeah, I think there is one story where I definitely would have been fired nowadays if I did that, which I won't reveal because that's for another time.
You're still employed. I get it. David, I can't thank you enough for joining me today, man. This has been an absolute thrill. For any SDRs, SDR leaders out there that are having trouble making their way through the myriad of issues and challenges that you face, both in upping your own game or trying to up the game of your reports, I highly suggest you hunt down David Wilkins. There are SDR leader groups based on geo. So there's one in APAC, there's one in EMEA, there's one in the US, because sellers and their leaders face different challenges, different cultures, different issues where you sit in the globe. And this is a great organization to affiliate yourself with if you're looking to up your game. David, again, can't thank you enough for joining us.
No
Super
worries.
grateful you took the time, and we'll certainly have you back again, my friend.
Cheers.
Cheers.